Imagine the arrogance of thinking that it is your right to tell other people how to live. You're not an elected body. You're just individuals who think that you're better, you're more clever than other people, and you have the right to tell other people how to live their lives. This is where the ideas, in this case, bad ideas, are hatched. They are hatched at the World Economic Forum level. We've been hearing for decades now phrases like diversity is our strength. Ladies and gentlemen, diversity never made a single civilization great. Diversity is what destroys civilizations. And you add to this that the Biden administration has effectively declared the United States is wide open, because that's what globalists want. So what you're seeing happening on our southern border, and now to some extent on our northern border, is what globalists are pushing all over the place. Democrats want to say if you want the borders closed, it means you don't care about these people. No, the fact of the matter is they don't care about these people. They have caused this crisis because they have essentially told these people to come to the United States. Not the immigrants' fault, not the migrants' fault that they're doing this. They're doing it because they were invited to come by Democrats who don't give a rip about them. Welcome to another episode of Ideas Have Consequences with me, Larry Alex Taunton. And today is a chalkboard day because I'm going to connect a lot of dots for you. Now, many of you who are part of the Posse, who've been following my work for some time, see that I do an awful lot of traveling. And sometimes those things may seem to you to be kind of disconnected, one not necessarily having anything to do with the other. Interesting, but not necessarily connected with one another. Well, today I am going to connect them for you. And you will know, many of you will know, that I have just returned once again from being south of the border. So I was this time I was in Mexico and I was in Colombia. But for the uninitiated to Ideas Have Consequences, I have for about the last 5 years, I have been going to Central and South America following these migrant caravans. Now, I was doing this before it was really making huge headlines. And it just seemed to me that no one was really asking why migrants were coming to the U.S. border. I mean, all the attention was on the border itself, but no one was really asking, what's going on south of the border? What is actually happening there? I mean, if you think about it and you're sitting on your front porch, you, let's say, have a ranch and you're looking out at your beautiful lawn and watching a sunset, and then all of a sudden your livestock, your cattle came stampeding across your lawn, you'd be asking yourself, what is going on over there? What has caused this? Are there poachers over there? Is there a forest fire in that direction? Are there predators? What is causing this stampede? So that's what I was doing, is I wanted to see how these things were coming about. Why is it that millions of people have been crossing our border? Now, part of that has to do with the fact that Democrats have essentially invited them. They have declared a kind of Black Friday sale that America is the world's department store and everybody should just come and line up and try to get in and get free stuff, or at least cheap stuff. That's one of the primary reasons, but there are other things that have been going on. So today, what I want to show you is how the ideas have huge consequences in the lives of normal people. Now, you will know that each year I go to the World Economic Forum, the WEF. Now, this is where the ideas, in this case, bad ideas, are hatched. They are hatched at the World Economic Forum level. Now, does the World Economic Forum itself, is it a governing body? Does it have legislative or executive or judiciary power? Well, the answer is no. I mean, they don't. But at this year's WEF, and I was there in Davos, Switzerland, we're talking about 50 heads of state, about 115 billionaires, 600 heads of major corporations, and about 2,700 attendees. And those attendees are people who pay big bucks to be members of the World Economic Forum, and they all gather in Davos, Switzerland, like Bond villains. Now, I will tell you that listening to these people nauseates me. I mean, not because everything they're talking about is evil. Some of the stuff they're talking about is evil, but because you can just kind of tell that they love listening to themselves talk, that they love this idea of gathering together and we're going to change the world. I mean, we are self-appointed. We are the self-enlightened. We're the individuals who believe that it is our right to tell everyone else how to live. And that's why I jokingly, but only sort of jokingly, call it the HOA from hell. Now, here in the United States, for those of you who don't know what an HOA is, I'm sure you have a different name for it. That abbreviation stands for Homeowners Association. And a homeowners association is, a little neighborhood collective where it always seems that lefties are in charge and trying to tell everyone else what color they can and can't paint their house and what kind of shingles they can and can't have and what their lawn needs to look like and what they can and can't do. I mean, so the WEF is a kind of HOA from hell. As we go through life, the years bring us wisdom, experience, and memories we hold dear. Yet with age, our health often faces new challenges. It's a natural part of life, but it's crucial to address these changes with the right care and attention. For me, one of the ways to stay sharp is to supplement. I've been using Liver Health Formula, and I recommend you try it for yourself to see the results that it can bring. And right now, I think is the time to start taking care of your liver because there is a silent epidemic affecting 100 million Americans. 1 in 3 Americans suffer from an overworked and sluggish liver. It affects our weight, energy levels, clear thinking and productivity, and even sleep. Our livers get bombed every day with GMOs, microplastics, toxins, and all of the stuff that you might not even know about. Liver Health Formula can support your liver to minimize the impacts of all of this. It is a premium supplement designed with 11 clinically proven botanicals to support and detoxify your liver, helping you feel revitalized and ready to conquer each day. Just listen to Mr. Harrington's testimonial, who shared his transformative journey. At first, I was skeptical, but the health improvement has been nothing but amazing. The tired, foggy feeling I've had is gone. I have more energy for a longer duration. Also, the service and delivery is always prompt. Of course, results are not typical, thus you have to see for yourself. There's an exclusive deal for my audience. Head to getliverhelp.com/Larry. And as a special offer, you'll get a free 1-month supply of nano-powered omega-3s with your order. That's getliverhelp.com/Larry. When I say that they don't have, it's not a governing body. It's the idea of the World Economic Forum is that they are making policy recommendations to governments. But the fact of the matter is, heads of government are part of the WEF, and they are deeply influenced by what happens here. So this is the idea level. This is what is going on at the idea level. And in my own work, what I want to do and have been doing for many years now is taking ideas and then going down to the grassroots level to see how those ideas are actually affecting real life people. Some of you will have read my first book, The Grace Effect, where I was taking the ideas of atheists, the so-called new atheists at the time, the guys who called themselves the four horsemen of the counter-apocalypse, Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, Daniel Dennett, and Richard Dawkins. We were taking on those guys in public debates. And some of you will know my work from going back then, where I was really, really focusing on the issue of academic atheism and watching how that was trickling down to the grassroots level. I try to take on different ideas in different periods of my professional life because it allows you to develop a kind of expertise in one issue, and then you develop another one, and so on. So at that time, it was academic atheism, and then Islam, and then on to other things. But atheism, if you were to say that there was a thread that ran through my entire career, it has been atheism. I have really, really focused on atheism, in part for personal reasons. And that is because when I was a young man in high school, I was kind of dabbling with the idea of atheism. I never found atheism to be particularly compelling. I mean, the idea that everything is sort of self-created, that you get a universe, that you get consciousness, that you get a DNA, which is 2.5 billion letters long, any one of those out of order, and it doesn't work, that all of that just somehow magically appeared, not from pre-existing material, but from nothing, ex nihilo. I never found that particularly compelling, but I did wonder if there is a God who is a personal God, or, is he an impersonal God, like a sort of deism? So this was something that I was focused on. I was thinking a lot about. This is before Richard Dawkins was writing on these kinds of things. And I was reading some of the old atheists. I was reading guys like Friedrich Nietzsche and so forth. And having ultimately rejected that and finding Christianity to be far more compelling worldview that really made sense of everything, and obviously giving me hope, I then, in a kind of Dostoevsky kind of way, Dostoevsky had been the Russian novelist, one of the greatest novelists of all time. Dostoevsky had been an atheist, and when he converted to Christianity, he then went to war on atheism. And in a similar way, I did that. I realized the dangers of that worldview. And so for about the last almost 20 years now, at Fixed Point Foundation, the nonprofit that I direct, we have been tracking atheism the way a hunter follows his prey. And we've been following from the academic level, from the level of guys like Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens and others. We've been following it from the academic level as it eventually made its way into institutions, into education, into pop culture. And now it has found its residence here. So you see, all of that is connected. If you go back to those debates that we were doing on atheism, I think the first one we did was in 2006. So again, almost 20 years ago. If you were to follow those ideas, which then again were sort of at the academic, the university level, they eventually made their way into popular culture, into film, into lower levels of education, and into the halls of government, into policy. And this is where we are now. So when we're talking about the level of ideas, they're no longer debating God's existence. They just assume he doesn't exist. And that's what leads to the kind of policies that they come out with. And I always say to you that when we're talking about this, we're not about these kind of people. We're talking about policies, individuals who are fundamentally anti-human. Their policies, if we were to really summarize it all, they're fundamentally anti-human. I want to make you aware of a course that I have filmed, that I've put together. It took a lot of time for me to put this together, and we're calling it Social Justice Exposed. It really is a comprehensive course for understanding Marxism. And these are days, by the way, where you need to understand what Marxism is. It's 49 chapters, almost 3 hours long. It's a kind of masterclass in Marxism. Now, it's a $99 value for just $49. Now, what do you get? A lifetime access to the course, plus a year membership to my private community, the Posse. Join the Posse. Members of the Posse get access to private chat rooms with other members, invites to monthly online book club meetings, which I'm very excited about. Going to be doing this little book, Tenebris, by Russell Kirk. First, you'll get access to exclusive video content, access to exclusive writings, discounts on additional course purchases, and the course available right now. Now, this took me a lot of time and effort to create. I went out to Dallas and we spent a couple of days putting this masterclass course together. Why don't you watch this trailer? Justice. It's a grand word, isn't it? It rides high over entrances to courts of law. It animates slogans and adorns banners of movements. The Russian Revolution, peace, bread, land. The Nazis, work and bread. Today, it's Black Lives Matter and Antifa. And it is on the tongue of everyone whose ambition is power, be he an aspiring liberator or a would-be tyrant. The slogans cloak a sordid agenda, Marxism. Let me be clear from the outset. The desire for justice is God-given. What we will be discussing in this course is how the modern social justice movement isn't the means of doing it. Social justice and Black Lives Matter are just words spoken by the ventriloquist doll on Marx's lap, and it leads to human degradation and ultimately to human annihilation. If you stand firm, you will be attacked. By equipping you in this course, I hope to awaken you to the horrors of the ideology. I hope you'll join us. Discounted pricing is only available for early members until the end of November. So please get it and join the Posse. I look forward to engaging with each of you. Now, if you go to the World Economic Forum webpage, what you will find, and it's kind of like a reverse, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where, you know, the Grail, the Holy Grail, is hidden among a lot of false grails. So a good thing is hidden among all these bad things. Any of these others will kill you, but the Grail will give you eternal life. In this case, it's the opposite. It is that they hide their evil agenda with lots of good things. So when you go to the World Economic Forum webpage, what you'll find is a lot of useless videos and articles and things like this that are on things like, basket weaving in Kenya and micro businesses in Micronesia and sustainable farming in South America, this kind of thing. But at their core level, the World Economic Forum is fundamentally anti-human, and it is because they are fundamentally atheistic. Now, they will be sure to have at some of their gatherings a rabbi and an imam and maybe some kind of Christian bishop or pastor, at least somebody who's pretending to be that, because they want to give the impression that they are very diverse and that they're open to lots of different perspectives and thinking. But you need to understand, A, that they're not, and that the World Economic Forum is fascist. They are fascist. Now, I hear a lot of people say, in fact, somebody put into the comments that the World Economic Forum is Marxist. No, they absolutely are not Marxist. They are fascist. And how so? And that is because things like ESG and DEI, those things, those are classic fascism. You cannot, by definition, be a billionaire and be a Marxist. You can't be a capitalist and a Marxist. It doesn't work that way. When I say they're fascist, again, what I mean by that is this, not Nazis, though some of them are starting to tilt towards Nazism. All Nazis are fascists, but not all fascists are Nazis. And that is because Nazism, in addition to being fascist, its chief characteristic is anti-Semitism. And not all fascists not all fascists are anti-Semites, but with the war taking place in the Middle East right now, I'm shocked by how many people who are coming out and revealing that they are anti-Semites. But anyway, that's kind of a separate conversation, sort of a separate issue that's going on there. But fascism, classic fascism, is the strict regimentation of the economy for war. That's really what it is. So Marxists don't believe in private property. Bill Gates has lots of private property, lots of private jets and multiple homes and multiple businesses. You better believe Bill Gates believes in private property. So does Klaus Schwab. They believe in private property, but they believe in it for them. So these are individuals who believe in private property. A distinguishing characteristic between fascism and Marxism, communism, socialism, is that in the socialist, the Marxist, the communist worldview, there's no private property. The state owns everything. In fascism, there is private property, but the way it is used, the way it is organized, the way it is focused is controlled by the state. You see? So that's what ESG and DEI do. They don't eliminate private property. They just simply concentrate it. They put the reins of corporations all in the hands of government or some kind of central organizing body like the World Economic Forum. So they then focus corporations for war. And you say, war how? Like war in Ukraine? Is that what you mean? Or war in the Middle East? No, I mean war against domestic populations. This is what a social credit system, effectively where they're trying to move it towards, is a kind of social credit system where you either bow to the gods, lowercase g, of this kind of corporate fascism, or you don't have a job, you can't participate in the economy, you are effectively frozen out. Klaus Schwab says in one of his books that they want to induce loneliness among people who will not cooperate with the WEF agenda. Now, he says it in much nicer terms. He makes it sound very innocuous, and that those people who don't participate, he sort of characterizes as individuals who are a threat to society. But the fact of the matter is we've already seen that. We've seen that with what was happening with vaccine mandates, with lockdowns, with people who are losing their jobs because of their failure to comply to some kind of government ordinance, some kind of government mandate. So again, here is the idea level. This is what takes place at the idea level. And so when I go to the World Economic Forum, what I'm doing is I'm sitting and I'm listening. Again, I pretend to be one of them. And this year, or I say this year, in a couple of months, the new year, January of 2025, I'll be going to the World Economic Forum again. And I want to include in here, maybe at this point, a little video that I just took off of my laptop. I was showing a friend of mine what they do at Davos. Davos, Switzerland is where the World Economic Forum is held every year. And they drive the prices up on all of these hotels. And it's not easy to get to Davos, Switzerland. It's a ski town, high in the Alps. And now it's easy for them to get there, the WEFers, as they call themselves, to get there because they fly in their private jets. And then they can't be bothered to get in their luxury cars. They helicopter from the airport into the city. But a guy like me who's going has to, say, take a train from Zurich or a car or whatever, fly into Zurich and then go from there, maybe Geneva, and then you'll work your way up into the mountains with multiple train changes, and it's difficult. But take a look at these prices right here for a hotel in Davos.
Look at these places. $117,000, $56,000, $42,000. $10,000, $11,000, $34,000, $38,000. Absolute insanity. Absolute insanity just for the dates of the WEF.
Now, those hotels that you were just seeing right there, those are not, you may be thinking, oh, wow, those must be really incredible exclusive hotels. Think Hampton Inn, think Holiday Inn Express. Those are not nice places. A few of them might be, a little upper tier, but they're not 5-star, kind of places. They're 3.5, maybe 4-star accommodations, and they drive the prices way up on those so the guys like me can't attend. And you may say, well, who would pay those kind of prices? Well, government policy wonks who are attending that, they're not paying for it. It's being paid for by you and me. It's being paid for by the taxpayer. Then you have billionaires who are coming, and of course they don't care. They're happy to pay it. And then you have World Economic Forum members who are attending, and they have to pay huge membership fees just to be part of the World Economic Forum. And then when you register, you get, one of the rooms that they have blocked out in a hotel, in a mediocre hotel that you get in order to attend. A guy like me, I have to stay somewhere an hour, hour and a half, maybe 2 hours away in order to go to the WEF. And I will. I'm doing that again this year. Now, typically what I do is I just walk into these places like I own it. Now, the last 2 years, I've gotten away with that. This year, maybe I won't. Maybe they are looking for me and maybe they stop me. And if they do, that's fine. It's no problem, because they can't prevent me from going into hotel lobbies and into coffee shops and into restaurants where the conversations really take place. And as you're sitting there listening to these people, again, I'm just going like, I'm just a fellow WEFer. And the result is that people end up talking to you. And that is because this is the kind of conference where people can't wait to tell you how important they are. I don't have to lie about who I am, because almost no one ever asks who I am, because they're so full of their own self-importance and they can't resist telling you how important they all are. I'm excited to announce the Ideas Have Consequences book club. Now, the date for the first book club meeting will be Wednesday, December 4th at 10 a.m. and again at 6 p.m. I'll be doing it twice. And the reason for that is because we have a lot of subscribers to Ideas Have Consequences who are overseas, or maybe you work and you can't do it at 10 a.m. or you can't do it at 6 p.m. Maybe you can do one or the other. So we want to try to accommodate you. The first book, and it's really a booklet because it's a short story, is Tenebris by Russell Kirk. Order the book at Trinity Forum's website. You'll see a link in the description below this video. You'll receive exclusive access only to members of the Posse when you join the book club. So sign up using the link in the description below this video. Now, the format of the book club is going to be, it's not going to be a YouTube live event. It's going to be a Zoom webinar-like call where members of the Posse will be able to discuss the book with me and with other members of the Posse. So we'll actually be able to see you and hear your voice, and we'll actually be able to interact. But the idea of this is to try to keep it small enough that I'm actually able to engage with you individually. You'll actually be able to interact and express some of your views. Now, I will say this. I am ruthless as an old teacher, old professor, that I require, if you're going to say anything, you have to have read it. Nobody's interested in hearing your opinion when you haven't done the homework. But make sure you do, and I think you'll really enjoy this little book. I'm trying to choose books that I think that you'll enjoy, and you'll be intrigued by where I take it. So when you join up, you'll receive an email with a private meeting link before the event. So come prepared with your questions. Honestly, I'm really looking forward to the Ideas Have Consequences book club. So please sign up. So this year I will attend again, but you may be thinking, why do you go? What's the whole point of going to the World Economic Forum? Well, again, it's because I want to listen to their ideas. I want to hear what they have to say. Just as a decade or more ago, I wanted to sit and listen to a Christopher Hitchens or a Richard Dawkins or a Daniel Dennett, or debating those guys publicly, because I want to hear what they have to say. I want to hear their worldview. I want to understand their worldview, because it is my life's mission to destroy it. These are evil ideas. And if you were to really distill what I do for a living, I destroy arguments, as the Apostle Paul put it to the Corinthians, and every lofty opinion that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. So I am a destroyer of arguments, but also construct arguments, the way, say, a lawyer might do that. So I do that because it is at the idea level that societies are made or destroyed. I mean, if we accept, and every intelligent person I've ever met does, if we accept that human nature is the same the world over, how do we account for the fact that some societies are very different from others? How do we account for North Korea's versus, say, the United States? How do we account for Nigeria's versus, say, France? Well, the difference, of course, isn't because human nature differs from one part of the world to another. The difference is the ideas that those societies have absorbed. So if your society has adopted the idea of, let's say, Islam, that society is going to turn out looking very different from a society that says it doesn't believe in God at all, say like China, or from a society that believes in God but believes in a Christian God. Those societies are all going to develop in very, very different ways. So ideas, as we say on this show, they have consequences. So I sit and I listen to these people, and I listen to what they have to say and the way they have processed the things that are taking place in the world. But what fascinates me about them is, I dare say, almost none of them ever really look to see what's happening at the other end of the spectrum. And this is where we see the consequences. Did I spell that right? Yeah, I think I did. So they're never really looking to see what's happening at the level of consequences. What are we seeing down here? So, for instance, let's take an issue like, let's say, what they put under the guise of sustainability. Sustainability. Now, under the guise of sustainability is all kinds of stuff. Sustainable farming and depopulation and that kind of thing. That's something that's happening on this end of the spectrum. So, for instance, if you've been paying to the news in Britain, then you know that there is a war on farmers. Jeremy Clarkson, with his show Clarkson Farm, he's really turned that TV show, and it's a terrific TV show. I should warn you that the language is pretty rough, but it is really a great TV show, and it's beautifully filmed. But he's really attempting to educate people while entertaining them. He's using entertainment as a vehicle, but he's really educating people about farmers, about farming, and about the importance of the job that they do in feeding the rest of us. Well, if you're paying attention to what's happening in Britain, there was just a farm protest just a few days ago, and that is because Starmer's government is making war on farmers, huge war on farmers, and they're doing it via very devious means. They're basically making it through regulation almost impossible for farmers to farm. They can barely make a living doing it. And then if you want to pass your farm on down, to your children, there's this massive inheritance tax, which makes it virtually impossible to do so. If you're not already independently wealthy, you won't be able to do it. And what that does is it allows for the government or foreign entities or whoever to swoop in and buy it. So there is a war on farming, on industrial farming going on around the world. If you've listened to Yuval Noah Harari, I like what, forgotten his name. Anyway, it doesn't matter. A writer for the New Yorker said, he said that human suffering doesn't seem to bother Harari, and Harari is he's kind of a celebrated popularizer of WEF ideas. Yuval Noah Harari, he writes on science and so forth, kind of the P.T. Barnum of the World Economic Forum, actually. But this is a guy, he's an atheist, he's a homosexual, and here's a guy who, according to this writer for the New York Times, says human suffering really doesn't bother him. What really gets him excited and angry is industrialized farming. So you see, the World Economic Forum has been pushing to end industrialized farming, trying to bring that to an end. And so that's down again, starting up here, guys like Harari and others, Their ideas come all the way down here, and the consequences are felt at the grassroots level by farmers themselves. That's what's happening here. But see, I don't think these people, my experience in Davos suggests to me that these people really don't ever get down here. They're not really seeing what's happening on this end of the spectrum. Let's take another current example of something where consequences are being felt, and that is with the perverse LGBTQIFG. It's all this crap over here. And I'm kind of joking here, but the alphabet mafia, as I call them, down on this level. So if you've been paying attention, Congresswoman Nancy Mace has been going at it with a new congressman posing as a congresswoman, so-called Sarah McBride. But Sarah is a man who pretends to be a woman. And there's been kind of this war on Capitol Hill where Sarah says that he, not she, but he is going to be going into the women's bathrooms because he has the right to do that. And Nancy Mace, Congresswoman Nancy Mace, Republican, said, "No way, man, we're not letting you in. You're not allowed to do that." And then she went and she tweeted that, look, we supported gay marriage. We have supported the agenda, but at this point, at the threshold of the bathrooms, it stops. And my own particular feeling about that was, Nancy, you can't go over waterfall halfway. Here's the WEF, which is also pushing this agenda. They're pushing the sordid alphabet mafia's agenda around the world. So we see the consequences of that all the way to Capitol Hill itself, where Nancy Mace says she and other women, undoubtedly true, feel threatened by the fact of a man dressed as a woman, pretending to be a woman, would want to use their bathrooms. She's 100% correct. However, she's trying to dam a river downstream. Rivers are always more easily dammed upstream. And she thinks that she could go over an ideological waterfall halfway, that she could accept the LGBTQ agenda from gay marriage straight on down. But now she says, I'm drawing the line right here at the threshold of the bathroom. No, once you embraced one illusion, gay marriage, there's no such thing as gay marriage. It is an oxymoron. Marriage, by definition, is between a man and a woman. And once you embraced that delusion, then you necessarily make other delusions inevitable. And in this case, it's a man pretending to be a woman and thinks he can saunter into the women's bathroom with his penis and use the toilets in there. Well, she says no. But again, this is where you're seeing, here's the ideas where these kind of ideas, these sordid ideas are hatched, and they're coming all the way down to this level of consequences. So you're seeing it here. How about with something like, and this is what took me south of the border, something like, in this case, mass migration. Mass migration. Now, this is happening because the open society types, and what is the open society? I did a whole podcast on the open society. That terminology was coined by Karl Popper, the philosopher, the late philosopher Karl Popper. And Karl Popper said a lot of things that you would agree with. Trust me when I say that. You can find some YouTube videos of him. By that, I don't mean you want to buy into his ideology in toto, but he said quite a few things that you would say, yeah, I think I can probably agree with that. But the idea of the open society was picked up by one of Karl Popper's students. And who was that? At the London School of Economics. And who was that? It was George Soros. And George Soros created what we now know is called what? The Open Society Foundation. And he uses the Open Society Foundation. He funnels billions of dollars through the Open Society Foundation to fund any number of sordid agendas around the world, kind of things that I don't think that Karl Popper would buy into. But one of them is mass migration. And I'm going to come back to this in just a moment. And then another idea is globalization. But where we're really seeing that right now is war in Ukraine. War in Ukraine. Now, what does this have to do with the World Economic Forum? Well, when I attended the World Economic Forum last year, they're all wearing, Ukraine shirts or Ukraine lapel pins or things of this nature because it's all pro-Ukraine. Ukraine is wonderful. Ukraine is a democracy. We're going to save freedom in Ukraine. As readers of my book, the Grace Effect will know I've been in Ukraine many times. Ukraine is a hellhole. And by that, I don't mean that I'm for Russia winning the war. They're both equally corrupt, deeply corrupt political cultures. And maybe the most corrupt participant in this war of all is the United States, is my own country, of which I'm quite ashamed. And I should add this, that Biden authorizing Ukraine to use long-range missiles to fire deep into Russia at this stage, post-Trump victory, it looks like what the Biden administration is trying to do is to escalate the war in the hopes that Putin will retaliate, which he'd be justified in doing, maybe lob a missile on Paris or lob a missile on London, and thus leave Trump with a war, potentially a world war, from which he cannot extricate the United States. You have to understand that war is very near and dear to the hearts of globalists. And why Ukraine? Because Putin is not a globalist. They're not offended by the fact that Putin is a tyrant. They're not offended by the fact that Putin doesn't allow free speech. They're not offended by the fact that he's corrupt. They are all of those things. What offends them about Putin is that Putin is not a globalist. He is not on board with the globalist agenda. So they are using Ukraine to provoke Russia and to fight a proxy war through Russia. And I dare say that if Trump had lost this election, you would see massive escalation here in Vietnam-like fashion. My father was one of the first military advisors sent by John F. Kennedy to Vietnam. A small group of American soldiers sent just simply to advise the Vietnamese. By the year of my birth, 1967, we had about 600,000 troops in Vietnam. That's where this was headed. Your sons, your daughters, but primarily your sons, were going to be sent to fight and die in this hellhole. That's what was going to happen. But Ukraine is very near and dear to the globalist agenda. And another reason is because they don't want the war to end. A lot of money is being made here. And I dare say that there's a lot of human trafficking that's going on there. My own personal belief is, and there's a Pulitzer Prize, if those things really don't mean much anymore because of just how corrupt legacy media is, but there's glory to be had for an intrepid journalist who is willing to follow the money that is going from the United States, hundreds of billions of dollars, through the Ukrainian laundry machine and then back out. And where is it going? Well, some of it is going back into the pockets of U.S. Politicians, but I think a lot of it is going here to fund the mass migration. That's what we're seeing taking place here. So again, the ideas take place up here at the World Economic Forum level, the bad ideas, and then they are felt down at this level. Imagine the arrogance of thinking that it is your right to tell other people how to live. You're not an elected body. You're just individuals who think that you're better, you're more clever than other people, and you have the right to tell other people how to live their lives. The problem with ideologues, again, defining ideologues as individuals who think their ideas matter more than people, one of the problems with them is that I maintain that almost none of them, very, very few of them, ever go downstream to see how their ideas are affecting the lives of real individuals. What does this look like? So that's what I've been doing. So when you see me, for instance, in Cairo, on the outskirts of Cairo at a place called Mokatam or Garbage City, I'm there to see what does this actually look like? You know, the religious agenda of the World Economic Forum. How is it actually playing out in a country like Egypt, where they're not telling you what is happening to Christians who are not allowed to participate in the economy, not allowed to live in the city. They live out in what is called Garbage City. When I'm going there, I'm going downstream to see how the ideas are affecting other people. Ukraine. Some of you will remember that I crashed one of the WEF meetings in January, and I'm sitting and listening to former Prime Minister Theresa May. And it's not a big group of people who are there. It's pretty amazing that I just walked straight in and nobody questioned me. I didn't pay for, a ticket to attend, none of that. But I go in and I'm sitting. So as I'm sitting and listening to Theresa May and these other panelists talking about all that they're doing for these Ukrainian war refugees. And one of the things that she was saying, which I thought was particularly outrageous, is that these people were so vulnerable to being trafficked. As they went into Poland, that the traffickers were waiting for them in Poland so they could, seize them and then sell them in, various countries around the world. So when this is done, I go up and I talk to Theresa May. And the photos we have of that, maybe you can put it on the screen, but the photos we have of that, she looks gleeful to be talking to me. And then you can see progressively, her smile disappears from her face and she wants to leave. But I was pointing out to her, Miss May, I was here. I was just here. I was downstream from the ideas that you're talking about. Have you been downstream? Have any of these panelists actually talked to these people? The answer was no. They haven't. So it sounds good to sit on a panel in Davos with all of these other smug people and talk about how you're changing the world and what you're doing for these people, but it's quite another thing to go and talk to them. And what they will tell you is those billions of dollars that are going from the United States, those people aren't seeing them. These war refugees are being aided, they are being helped by Christian organizations that are doing it, nonprofits that are doing it. Furthermore, as I pointed out to her, Miss May, Ukraine is infinitely more corrupt than Poland. Those people don't have to go to Poland to be trafficked. They're being trafficked in Ukraine. I wrote a book on human trafficking in Ukraine. I think that not only is Ukraine one of the globalist laundry machines to fund all kinds of other global projects, but it's also their chief hub of human trafficking. Now, why would that be? Well, the answer is pretty simple. It's because the tastes of individuals who are buying other individuals from traffickers, they primarily want white women, sometimes little boys, and Eastern European women are often very attractive. So they're not chiefly trafficking them, say, out of Africa, but they're doing it out of Eastern Europe. So that's girl with the dragon tattoo, kind of stuff that's going on there. So that's what's going on in a place like Ukraine. So that's what we have going on there. Now we come to the component, back to the component of mass migration. And what I want you to understand about mass migration is, again, I'm going downriver from the ideas, is that what does this look like? What does the open society look like? Well, these are people who are all insulated from their ideas. They don't really care. This is why, by the way, I'm going to have members of the Posse read Tenebris, written by Russell Kirk. This little booklet right here that you can get from Trinity Forum, pretty cheap. We don't get any kind of cut off of that, but we want to get you to order that. And by the way, we're starting this book club. It is exclusive to members of the Posse. You can join the Posse, and you can do that by going to join.larrytaunton.com. That's join.larrytaunton.com. And we need you to, because you guys are the ones who fund me to go to things like the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, or who send me to Garbage City, Bakatam in Egypt, or who send me to South America to see what's happening there, or whatever is happening to the Ukrainian border in Poland. You're the ones who help fund that and fund this show so that I can connect these dots for you. But the reason why I want you to read Ex Tenebris, and we're starting with that, it's a wonderful, actually a little ghost story. But Russell Kirk is making a point, a powerful point about socialists and about ideologues, because the chief antagonist in that story is a guy who just looks at his map all day, and he's bothered by the fact that there's one little pin in his map that is bothering him because it's an old woman he can't get to move. He wants to make her move. He wants to make her leave her home, to leave the village that she's grown up in and lived most of her life. And this is kind of the way these people think. They don't think downstream where the ideas are actually affecting the lives of real people. That's what I do here. That's what I do here. When I was talking about my book, The Grace Effect, I don't know that I ever quite finished making that point in following the new atheists who spoke of atheism at a government level as though that would really be a wonderful thing and it would lead to a wonderful society. And what fascinated me about the new atheists, among other things, is while they were often scientifically very well educated, even superbly educated, they're historically naive and ignorant. I mean, they talked about atheistic regimes as though that's never been tried. I mean, it has been tried many times. It's being tried right now in China, in North Korea. It's being tried all over the world, increasingly in Western Europe and increasingly in the United States. Now, we're hoping to roll that back with Trump's election, but the old Soviet Union was atheistic to its core. Socialism, as Dostoevsky pointed out, is by definition atheistic. You can't be a Christian and a socialist any more than you can be a Yankees fan and a Red Sox fan. I mean, at some point, those worldviews, they clash. They're in competition with one another. And Ex Tenebris is a beautiful illustration of how those people think, because I really want you to get that. I really want you to understand that. But when we're talking mass migration here, what does this look like? I mean, what does it look like when you open your borders? You open the borders to the Shire, to all the orcs, who come pouring in. I mean, can you live peaceably with orcs? Well, hobbits can't. Nobody can. Not even orcs can live peaceably with other orcs. And in this case, the orcs that we're talking about is Islam. Islam is an evil religion and an evil worldview. And by the way, if you want to know why my channel is suppressed so badly, let me tell you how YouTube censorship works. They turn this, they make it seem like it's a service for you, but it actually is a service for them. Their algorithms, what they can do is they turn a show like this into a transcript. So they create a transcript of the show, and then their artificial intelligence is designed to read it and to look for certain buzzwords and phrases and things they don't like, and then they begin to suppress the content accordingly. So in this case, you better believe that this is very near and dear to them. Did they mind me talking about this? No, not really. I've talked about the World Economic Forum many times and have hundreds of thousands of hits when I'm talking about that. But when I get into the sordid sexual agenda, they're going to put their fascist boot right on my throat because they don't want me to be heard. When I am talking about Islam, they put their fascist boot right on my throat because they don't like what I'm saying. So they don't want me to say that either. So that's the way this tends to work. But anyway, I feel like it's my job to tell you the truth. And I won't allow my presentations to be determined by algorithms, because then I'm just kind of playing their game with them. And that's why we need you, to join the posse so that we can defeat the algorithms. And some of you have complained that you don't get notifications of Ideas Have Consequences episodes when they're posted. Well, that's another way that YouTube suppresses a channel like mine, is they go, oops, it was just a technological glitch. We meant to send the notification, but we just forgot. Or maybe they front load an episode with loads of commercials, theirs, not ours, because they know that a lot of people aren't going to hang around when that's the case. Or maybe they make it pinwheel. This has difficulty loading, things of that nature. This is the stuff that they do. But when you join the posse, what you enable us to do is you come over there, and we're able to give you all the content that we want, and we can notify you directly of new episodes when they're posted here or on Rumble or on social media. That way because we can communicate directly through you to you, because we're not going through the middleman of Google. And Google, by the way, fascist. One of the World Economic Forum board members, so-called agenda contributors, is Google CEO. Now, you have other companies down here that adopt these ideas because they feel like they're pressured to do it, which in some ways makes them worse, in my opinion. I mean, Google believes this stuff. Google buys into all this stuff. But you have other companies that bow to the woke mob because they fear the woke mob, and they fear the destruction, of their business and thus their livelihood, and therefore they go along. They're cowardly. But Google, YouTube, those guys are all on board with this stuff. They're drivers of it. They love it, along with BlackRock. So when we're talking mass migration, this episode will get like 3 views now, because because I'm saying all this stuff. But when we're talking mass migration, what again, I ask, is the result when you bring together cultures that are antithetical from one another? Well, it doesn't work, does it? You've been hearing for some time, we've been hearing for decades now, phrases like diversity is our strength. Ladies and gentlemen, diversity never made a single civilization great. Diversity is what destroys civilizations. Why? Because it's when they can't agree on the color of an orange. I mean, they're so diverse. They don't have shared values. They don't have shared languages. They don't have shared culture. And thus, they cannot cooperate and get along. What makes a civilization great is when we find our ability to overcome our diversity and thus find commonality. And this is the beauty of America, the idea of the melting pot, that whatever background you came from, that you could come to the United States, and if you could enter into that country and genuinely say that you agree with these beautiful words, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's wonderful, because you can be from Italy and say, I agree with that. You can be from Germany and say, I agree with that. You can be from China and say, I agree with that. So it's in commonality, and this is on our money. This is what e pluribus unum, that Latin phrase, means. Out of many, one. But see the way these guys think, what they promote, because they do know that it leads to the destruction of existing societies and the principles upon which they're based, is they love forcing diversity. Not because they think it unifies, but because they know it doesn't. They know that it leads to a breakdown of society and a breakdown chiefly of Christian values, so that they can burn all that to the ground and create anew. Again, this is the way globalists who are ideologues think. They're revolutionaries who believe that you can erase the societal blackboard and start all over again. start all over again. And that's what they want to do. They want to destroy existing religion. They want to destroy existing social mores. They want to destroy existing social constructs so that they can recreate it according to their own utopian ideas. This is what utopia is. I mean, if you go and read Thomas More's Utopia, it's a dictatorship. It's anything, but we have taken the word utopia and given it a meaning of perfection, of a, if you say that that this place is like utopia, we mean it's like heaven. But that isn't actually what Thomas More's utopia was. It was a dictatorship, and it was a dictatorship that was governed by individuals who deemed themselves to be, in Plato's terminology, like philosopher kings. They're individuals who are themselves enlightened, and they see it as their right. I won't say a God-given right, because these aren't people, as I pointed out, who believe in God. They think it's a right given to them by nature to rule and govern the rest of us according to their own dictates. That's what they want to do. So they are happy with destroying whatever exists on the cultural chalkboard. They're happy to do it. And in the case, their primary weapon for doing this is mass migration. These people are the shock troops that are flooding across not just the U.S. southern border and now the Canadian border, but they're flooding into countries all over the world, flooding into Western Europe. And the fact is, those countries cannot, and these people know it, they can't absorb all of those individuals. And they cannot find peace with them because, at least in the case of Europe, they're mostly Muslims who are coming in. Muslims have no desire to preserve Western culture at all. I would argue that it was almost certainly a Muslim that burned Notre Dame to the ground. And all these church fires that we're seeing all over Western Europe, hundreds of them. Just by accident? I don't think so. They want to destroy that culture. And you see, that's where the WEF sees them as partners, because they want to destroy Christian culture too. They're atheistic. Muslims, of course, are not, but they're happy to partner unofficially with them for the destruction of Western culture, which is based on a Judeo-Christian worldview. So these are the shock troops. You flood them into any country, and those countries cannot absorb them, and it necessarily changes not just the demographic makeup, but it changes the culture. It changes society as a whole, eventually changes the form of government. That's what's happening. So, again, going downstream from the World Economic Forum, where the ideas, in this case, bad ideas, are hatched, I wrote a piece on this for the American Spectator. You can find it. But I went to 13 places of terrorist acts, all of them committed by Muslims. Coincidence? I don't think so. So I went to Charlie Hebdo, and I went to Westminster Bridge in London. I was in Nigeria, where loads of terrorist attacks are happening all the time that you don't even hear about. I was in Nice, where the truck was used to run over, I think, about 80 people. I was in Stockholm for the Stockholm truck attack. All of these places. And here's what fascinated me about that, is I would interview people who were witnesses to these events. And if you ever brought up, why do you think this happened? Their answer was typically, well, the person was crazy. And that's because they've been programmed to say that. And I say, but no, this individual did this, wasn't crazy, perfectly rational, wasn't strung out on drugs or drunk when they did it. They knew exactly what they were doing, and they were pushing a Muslim agenda. The people we call radical Muslims, they're not radical Muslims, they're Orthodox Muslims. The people we call moderates are like Methodists. They're people who have no attachment to their holy literature whatsoever. They're just simply Muslim in name only, the way that Methodists are Christian in name only. By the way, if you're a Methodist, I'm kind of sort of teasing, but I was a Methodist as a kid when I first started going to church, and I just decided, you know what, Methodists, they don't really believe anything. Even as a kid, I found that to be the case. But anyway, these so-called radical Muslims, they're very orthodox. They do what Muslims are supposed to do, model their lives after Muhammad and read the Quran and the Hadith and do what it tells you to do. And what does it say? Well, it says that non-Muslims must convert, pay a tax, or die. Those are the three options. So the people who are, flying planes into the sides of buildings, or driving over people, or beheading them, or raping white women, which was what was happening and still is undoubtedly in places like Rotherham. The Rotherham scandal, almost nobody in the United States knows anything about, where tens of thousands of British white girls were, to quote the Times of London, raped on an industrial scale. And it was a highly organized operation where Muslims, chiefly Pakistani and some Afghan Muslims living in Britain, were taking these girls, most of them adolescent girls, and they're driving them around the country and they're selling them. $50 to have sex with this girl. She's in there. Give me money. This is what was going on. And it had been reported by many of these girls many times, but because, just like witnesses to these terrorist attacks, whom when I spoke to and said, you think Islam had anything to do with it? They all were afraid to say that because they were afraid to be called racist. They've been programmed that that's the worst possible thing that you can be called. By the way, Islam is a religion, it's not a race. So it's a stupid argument in the first place. And Islam is every bit as dangerous as, say, fascism is or Marxism. It's every bit. It's militaristic and has very little value for human life, at least in the case of Islam, human life that isn't Muslim. But they're afraid of being called racist. And when these girls at Rotherham, you can look this up. I've written on it. Other people have written it up, written on it extensively. Almost nobody's been punished for this. But when these girls would say go to a police department or a school teacher, or a social worker, or a counselor, and say that they were, had been raped multiple times by these Muslim men, these people did almost nothing. And why not? Because they were afraid of being called racist. So again, here's the ideas. They go downstream, and this is the way they affect the lives of ordinary people. I've been going to systematically all of them and investigating what's going on there. Okay, so I took a little break to draw a map for you. It is not to scale, but I just drew out this map. I took about 15 minutes to draw this out in order to give you an idea of how ideas have severe consequences on the life of people. I mean, that's what we've been talking about, the World Economic Forum and their ideas, how they go from being hatched in places like Davos and then flowing downstream until the consequences are felt at the grassroots level. Well, one of the major places that it is really being felt is with mass immigration. Now, we talked about what that looked like in Western Europe, that it's leading to loads of terrorism, it's rape gangs, no-go zones, Muslims who aren't assimilating, all those kinds of things. The United States is a very different sort of thing because the people are flowing into our country, while some of them are being flown from the Middle East. Many of them, most of them, the overwhelming majority of them are people who are coming from Central and South America. Now, I have been south of the border. I know a lot of Americans, it's kind of funny because I always tell Mexicans, Central Americans, South Americans, that you need to understand that to Americans, everything south of the Texas border is Mexico. I mean, it's just all Mexico. There's just no understanding of the nuances between one country to the next. But I want you to understand this issue because I want Trump to destroy what I'm going to lay out for you. President Trump, I know some of your advisors watch Ideas Have Consequences. Please listen to them because this whole system is corrupt. It is rotten to the marrow of its bones, and it needs to be destroyed. So let me explain to you what is happening. So I've been down here on and off all over South America and Central America and Mexico for about the last 5 years. I suppose I've been down here maybe 12 to 15 times, a lot of times. And I've done it because, as I was saying before, I want to go downriver and I want to see how the ideas are actually affecting real people. The people who gather together in Davos, who make policy in Paris and London and Washington, D.C., they're not going to these places, or if they do, they're going there for a photo op and, with their security services, and they don't actually risk anything, and they're in no way really meaningfully rubbing elbows with the people who are suffering because of their policies. Now, I want to be really, really clear here from the outset what I'm saying about immigration. I want to make sure that you get this. Two things are true at the same time. One is, I want our borders protected with lethal force. I want our borders protected. I don't want any of these illegal flights of people being brought into the United States. I do not want mass immigration. So I want the borders protected. That's one thing that is true. On the other hand, I think that as conservatives, and really, as I've explained in another episode of Ideas Have Consequences, authentic conservatism has a Judeo-Christian worldview at its core. And that's because it's born out of the Decalogue. It's born out of the Ten Commandments, Exodus 20. Those are the basic principles of a conservative worldview. And because of that, we do or should, if you are an authentic Christian, you ought to care what's happening to these people. But even if you don't, there are very practical reasons why you should care and why you should want to help them. Even if really in your heart, you just don't give a rip what happens to any of these people. There's a very practical reason why you should want to help them. And it is because it will stop the flow that is coming to the United States. So on this particular trip, I scheduled this trip for the day after the election. And the reason that I did that is because I knew that the election, one way or the other, the outcome was going to have an effect on immigration. So I went back to the same places where I had been several times before. I went to Mexico City, which the abbreviation for that is CDMX, if you don't know, is Ciudad de Mexico. And, one of the largest cities in the world, 25 to 28 million people. I went there because on the outskirts of the city, there are several migrant camps. You would find the Spanish-speaking ones mostly together in their camps. That might be Guatemalans, Colombians, Venezuelans tend to be the largest number of them. Sometimes there's some Brazilians. Brazilians are not Spanish speakers, at least not native Spanish speakers. They speak Portuguese, but there's not enough Brazilian migrants to create their own camps. So they tend to flow into the Spanish ones Spanish-speaking ones, because they can at least almost get along in there. There's some similarities in the languages, and then you have Haitians who are coming here. They're flying. They used to fly into, and again, not to scale, but Nicaragua is about right here. And they were flying into Nicaragua, which enabled them to go around the Darien Gap, which is this area right here. And it is the most dangerous jungle in the world. It's 60 kilometers deep. People think that you can get on the Pan American Highway from Anchorage, Alaska, and drive all the way down to the tip of South America. That is false. You cannot do that, and that is because there's no roads that go through the Darien Gap. Now, there are trochas, pathways, that now lead through there because there's been so much human traffic that has gone through there in the last several years that has created them. But you're not going to get through there even if you're driving my Defender, a 4x4. You cannot drive through it. You can't go through it on a dirt bike. Not going to happen. So if you were going to drive the Pan American Highway, if you survived Mexico and cartel country there, and you made it this far, you would have to take a ferry in Panama around the Darien Gap. Take your vehicle around if that's what you want to do. But just so you know, don't think that you can drive straight through. So the Haitians, who are French speakers, they tend to have their own camps. So again, on the outskirts of Mexico City, you would find Haitian camps, usually to themselves. And those are people who are fleeing civil war. They're fleeing satanic ritual. They're fleeing cannibalism. And they create camps of their own here. And then you have in places like along in here, Barranquilla, Santa Marta, Cartagena, you have Venezuelan migrants and some others. But just so you understand, the reason they're coming through Colombia is that Colombia is the largest country. I didn't have enough board here to show it to you, but Colombia is the largest. Excuse me, let me rephrase that. Colombia, being the northernmost country in South America, is the only country in South America that is on both the Atlantic and the Pacific sides. And so if you're going to walk to the United States, you've got to go through Colombia. And Colombia, so you'll understand, is huge. Colombia is almost twice the size of Texas, 1.7 times the size of Texas to be precise. So you have all these migrants who are coming. Now, why are they coming? According to CNN, they are coming because of climate change, which is just a load of nonsense. That is just a flat-out lie, and it's a laughable lie. What is happening is these people are fleeing places like, most of them are coming out of Venezuela. I'm speaking anecdotally, and also speaking with members of Centerfront. Centerfront is the Panamanian Border Patrol, and they're more like special forces groups. I've been with them into Darien. So these people are fleeing countries like Venezuela, which have adopted socialist, Marxist policies. Venezuela was once one of the wealthiest countries in the world. It is now a socialist hellhole because socialism is the opposite of the Midas touch. Everything it touches, it turns to crap. It just turns to dust. It just is ruinous in its outlook, in its economic policies, but not just economic policies, it leads to human degradation. So these people are fleeing. Let's just follow them, and I have. So they are dumped out into a place called Macau here, and they start in, say, Maracaibo, and then they make their way along the Colombian coast, going through a variety of cities, and along the way, they are helped by who? The United Nations. And this takes us back to what we were talking about before, because where's the United Nations getting the money? George Soros doesn't have enough money to do this. George Soros, on the scale of billionaires, you've got guys like Bill Gates, who are way, way, way at the top, and Elon Musk, and then you have George Soros, who's way down here. He doesn't have the kind of money that it takes to do what I'm seeing. Now, when I first started coming down here, say in like 2019, what you had, the immigration that you saw was ad hoc. It was unorganized, and it was Facebook groups, and it was just the migrants themselves trying to give each other ideas and ways in order to help them along the way to get into the United States. But as I came down again and again and again and again and again, it was getting more and more organized. And then you began noticing that the United Nations was involved, Colombian migration was involved, a series of NGOs were involved, and they're all working with the cartels. They're working with a Colombian cartel, which runs this little town called Nicoclí, called the de Golfo cartel. They're making huge money off of this. If you saw my Twitter and me flying into an airfield that was covered with trucks, this is what they do with these airfields they're not airports as such, meaning they're not manned, they're not staffed. They're just a jungle airfield or something, maybe an abandoned airfield of some kind. What they do, because again, they're not staffed, is that they put livestock on those runways, or they put obstacles, say tires or automobiles. In this case, they put trucks. Now, the last time I flew down to Nikokli, it was covered with livestock. On this occasion, they had trucks on it. And the reason for that is because it prevents what they don't want, which is ghost flights, that you can fly in unnoticed and be gone before they realized you were even there. And what happens is the pilots, seeing that there are obstacles on the runway, they start circling the runway, trying to figure out their plan. And while they do that, the bad guys or, the police, who may be one and the same, see your plane circling, and by the time you do land, there's a big reception waiting for you there. Now, again, I've posted some of this on my Twitter page, which shows us circling the airfield, and then the pilot saying, "Hey, we think we can land. It's going to be pretty bumpy because we got a very short runway before we hit a truck." But they did it. And then when we did land, the police are there, the sirens, the lights. We have a huge reception committee waiting for us when we land. But I'll explain why we went there. So in past, what I've been doing is following these groups and going into their little encampments all along the way and interviewing them. What are you fleeing? Why are you coming to the United States? What's your goal? What do you want to do? And most of these people, they're not educated, because if they had money, they would be coming via some other means, a much more efficient means. But even though they're not educated, they all have a pretty good idea what they're fleeing, and that is that they're fleeing socialism, which has created circumstances for them that are unlivable, where they no longer have work. Their currency has become worthless due to inflation, kind of like the rent and mark and the end days of the Weimar Republic, and they can't feed their families. So they're doing what anybody would do. And then you add to this that the Biden administration has effectively declared the United States is wide open, because that's what globalists want. So what you're seeing happening on our southern border, and now to some extent on our northern border, is what globalists are pushing all over the place. They're pushing it in Western Europe as well. Now, I went down after the election, the day after the election. I stayed up long enough. My wife was like, come on, let's, get to bed. And I was like, I will not be able to sleep until I know that Trump has won. And I was waiting for the steal. I was waiting for the counting to mysteriously stop. And then all of a sudden the next day we would be told that Kamala Harris had won. But thank God that's not what happened. And then a few hours later, I got on a plane and I flew to Mexico City, where I've been twice this year going to these migrant camps. And so going with a translator, I'm going into these camps that can feel a little dangerous, and talking to these people. Now, when I was there earlier this year, the camps were huge. I mean, huge. And a camp is actually too grand of a term. We're really talking about people sleeping along the sidewalks with whatever they can find. Blankets, plastic bags, cardboard. This is the stuff they're living in, and they're living in squalor. We're talking about rats, mice, people who are undernourished, who can't get proper food, and so forth. But Mexico recently had an election, and one of the campaign promises was they were going to clean up Mexico City. Mexico City, by the way, the city center is lovely. I recommend you taking a vacation there. That's not where these camps are. They were kind of on the outskirts in slums, like every city has in America or in Mexico. And what the police did in some of them was that they came in with something like militia. They came in with their shields and their batons and riot gear, and they drove these people out. So this time when I went to Mexico City to some of these migrant camps around the city, I found them largely deserted. And I was discovering the same in Colombia, where NGOs, which I suggest to you are being funded with your tax dollars if you're an American, through money that's being funneled, laundered in Ukraine and then coming back to pay for this. Because this is a massive operation. The Biden administration has been running a massive human trafficking op. That's what this is. A massive human trafficking op. So on this occasion, I noticed that the camps were fairly deserted, and I had noticed it also in Colombia. So the question became, are there fewer migrants? Or have they just moved from where they were to some other part of the city? And the only way I could really know if Trump's election was having an effect, the Trump effect, on migration, the only way I could know it is to go to Necoclí, Colombia, this little town right here. Now, why is that? Because it is the bottleneck for South American migrants. It is the bottleneck for them. Wherever their camps are in Colombia or in Venezuela or Peru or Guatemala or Bolivia or whatever country they're in, and I've been in most of them, interviewing these people, they all have to go through, almost all of them, have to go through Necoclí. Now, Necoclí, once upon a time, was, the Fort Lauderdale of Colombia. It's a small beach town. It's a vacation town. It's actually a lovely little town. At least you can see in its bones, so to speak, that it at one time was a lovely place. And it's the sort of place where you have little villas that you can rent on the beach, and you can go for a boat ride, and there's a store that sells beach balls and swimming suits and beach towels and suntan lotion and this kind of thing. That's what it was in past, but not anymore. Now it's a town that has been overrun with migrants who gather here and wait to catch a ferry. And the ferries are really Zodiac boats that will hold, I've never done an actual count, but I'll say 30 to 50 people that they can get on them. So these people come into this town and they wait sometimes for months to get on one of these. And you say, why does it take so long? Because the cartels are running the ferries and they don't do it for free. And the way the cartels work is you discover, for instance, when I've talked to the Chinese, who are very reluctant to talk to you, who gather in this city, or let's say Afghans, the cartels send someone to talk to you. And if they see that you're coming out of, let's say, Venezuela or Colombia or Peru or someplace like that, they know you don't have any money. So they maybe say to you that the cost, per head cost, to catch one of these ferries is $150. Because they know that's about all you're going to be able to scrape up. And even that, that's a month's salary for, say, the average Colombian. I mean, that's a lot of money for them, $150 US, and particularly when you're talking per head. So how do they get it? Well, they do it by selling little trinkets on the street or performing some kind of service, shoe repair, or maybe some kind of automotive work or something like that, or they sell themselves. And that's the reality. They're selling themselves. And then when they've got the money, they pay the cartels and they're put on one of these that takes a couple hours to get across the Gulf here. And then they are landed at a place called Akandi. And Akandi is where they begin their journey through the Darien Gap. Now, the Darien Gap is full of every kind of pestilence, every kind of predator. It's mountainous. It's terrible. And so people are dying in here. Again, you will recall earlier this year, if you look at our immigration documentary, what is going on there? It's the Hotel California of jungles. You check in, but you don't ever leave. And there are indigenous people in there, cartels, militia groups, bandits, you name it. And if you disappear in the Darien Gap, nobody's coming for you. No Columbo is coming to investigate your murder or your disappearance. And it's because these migrants, and please stick with me as I explain this to you, give you the big picture of this. These migrants, as they're coming from, let's just take the one example of Venezuela, which is where most of them are coming from. As they're making their way all the way to the United States, they're not just illegals in the United States. They're illegals in every country they pass through. So nobody wants them, and there's no documentation for them. Hence the reason, ladies and gentlemen, that 500,000 children have disappeared, making their way from here all the way to the U.S. border. 500,000. And I would suggest to you that this number is actually low. I don't have any proof of that. I don't have a source for that. It's just my gut feeling because of what I have seen here. I have seen enough evil and wickedness to last me a lifetime. And I'm very poor at videoing things. I'm not a big picture taker. I don't take loads of video. I have to be reminded to do that. I kind of wish I have somebody who's with me who can do that. But I don't take anybody that I actually love or care deeply about to some of these places. I let adults make their own decisions as it relates to that. But, you know, I'm not taking a good friend into the Darien Gap. It's just far too dangerous for that. And so what is happening to these people is don't hate the migrants themselves. Remember what I said at the beginning of this. I want our border defended. I want it defended with lethal force. I want machine guns on our borders. But I also care what happens to these people. And I want to help them. I want to see the Trump administration help them stay in their own countries. Because until you address the source, which isn't CNN, climate change, until you address the source of the problem, they're going to keep coming. And the source of the problem, again, the ideas that are upstream, World Economic Forum, the World Economic Forum is fascist, but the way they want you to live is socialist, is Marxist. Fascism on top, for them, where they own everything, can have private property. For you, you will own nothing and be happy. What a load of nonsense. It's a lie. In recent years, Marxism has made massive advances in South America. Marxists have captured Peru, Colombia, Honduras, Chile, the most stable democracy in South America. And if I didn't say Colombia and Venezuela and Brazil. I mean, in the case of Colombia, we're talking an actual Marxist terrorist is now the president. And by the way, these elections were all very 2020-like in their dubious nature. They look highly suspicious. And the result is that their economies start to do this. And when you combine that with what has happened in the pandemic, it isn't millions of people who are knocked back down into utter squalor because they were unable to work. It's billions of people. Take Colombia again, for example. Colombia is, in a lot of ways, is a remarkable country. I really enjoy the Colombian people. I like Colombian food. Colombian culture is colorful. It's fascinating. Its history is fascinating. Most Americans, when they think of Colombia, they think of Pablo Escobar back in the 90s. Medellin, back in the 90s, had the highest per capita murder rate in the world. Medellin today is very beautiful and, at least in the city center, reasonably safe city. A lot of Americans are moving there. Expats are going there. Great weather, great food, great climate, and pretty safe. And since the 90s, Colombia has been making this very slow, but real progress towards becoming a more stable democracy, towards becoming a better country, a safer country, a country that has a real future. But now, with this dubious election and a Marxist president, Colombia is going to start going back in the other direction again, and people are already feeling it. Now, what I started seeing during the pandemic was that you had people who, let's say, a cobbler, a shoemaker, or a man who mends shoes, who has a little kiosk. This is an actual individual that I spoke to on the streets of Cartagena, who was Venezuelan. But he went to Cartagena and he started working, and he started his own little business and his own little kiosk, not making a lot of money, still very poor, but he was able to feed his family, and they were able to stay in a little apartment. Life for them felt pretty good, certainly far better than it was when they were in Venezuela. But then came the pandemic. And guess what? He was shut down and his family was starving. And this is what happened to people in service industries. You talk about what happened in the United States and people losing businesses. People weren't, as bad as it was in the U.S., people weren't starving as a rule. But we're talking about people here who could no longer feed themselves. So what did they do? They packed up and started making their way to the United States, and they're going to places like Nicoclí. Now, as I was telling you, for most South Americans, we're talking about getting on one of these ferries. It's maybe $150 a head. The Chinese, they go over to the Chinese, visit with them, cartel members that is, and they ask them, where they're going and where they're from. I have a sister in San Francisco. You have family back in China? Yeah, sure do. It's going to be $5,000 a head for you, Chinese people. Get your family to wire it. In Nicoclí, as small as it is, I counted 2 Western unions that were just a couple of blocks apart, and wire Western unions there so they can call family can wire them money, and they can in turn pay the cartels. Now, one woman, some of you might have seen this interview with a young woman in Mexico City. She looked to me like she was 15, but turns out she's 20. She spoke excellent English, and she's tiny little thing. She was 8.5 months pregnant. She was waiting for La Bestia. La Bestia is the train that they catch here, means the beast. It's sometimes called the train of death. It's a freight train, not a passenger train. They all get along the top of it, and they ride it 600 miles north to the U.S. border, exposed to everything, on the top of it. Now, this woman, she said to me, when I had mentioned her, I said, did you come through the Darien Gap? And she seemed quite surprised that I would know that. And she said, yes. And I said, did you go through Nicoclí? And she was really surprised. She said, do you know Nicoclí? And I said, I've been there. And that shocked her most of all. Gringo in Nicoclí? Yeah, I've been there. She said, then you know how dangerous it is, especially for a gringo. I said, what do they charge you to cross on the ferries? And she kind of looked at the ground and she said nothing. She said, they didn't charge us anything. Ladies and gentlemen, the Golfo cartel is not running a charity. They don't take people across the Gulf for free. I even wondered if that child she was carrying was a result of being raped. But I promise you, they got something out of her. She can go for free. Doesn't work that way. Now, what I'm wanting to see happen here, so you have these people who are going all along this way, in every one of these countries, at the direction of Democrats, of the Biden administration, he is saying to them, we don't want you. Get out of Colombia. The United States that way. Panama says, we don't want you. The United States is that way. Costa Rica says that way. Nicaragua says that way. And the head of Senafront, one of their outpost commanders in Darien, said to me, your country is committing suicide by letting these people come in. Now, we know that Trump, and he's already, by the way, having an effect because the numbers were way down. He hasn't even taken office. And that actually surprised me because I thought the numbers, these camps would actually swell as people were in a panic trying to get to the U.S. border before Trump is inaugurated. But see, the problem for them is that the journey from here, let's just say from Venezuela all the way to the U.S. border, is months in the making as a rule. And that's because they're all using it's a variety of means, it's the cost, it's all those things. They're traveling on foot, in buses and ferries, you name it, in order to get there. But this is human trafficking, people. It is human trafficking. And look at how many children have disappeared. We're talking about the ones that have disappeared in the United States. There's no telling, there's no record, there's no way of knowing how many of them have disappeared here. And what I want to see is lethal force on our borders, but I also want to see us helping these people to stay in their own countries. The young woman that I was just talking about, she said she was glad to see Trump elected because she hoped he would topple Maduro, the Marxist president of Venezuela, and make her country livable again because she wants to go back to Venezuela. Most of these people want to stay in their own countries. But until we address the source of the problem, I was thinking this, if you're familiar with the Monroe Doctrine, the United States, basically, and issuing the Monroe Doctrine stated, all countries were to stay out of the Western Hemisphere, that this is sort of our playground. And we haven't been enforcing the Monroe Doctrine for decades now. And the result is that the Chinese and the Russians and various others all now have footholds in various parts of Central and South America. But it has also led to the collapse of some of these regimes and hence causing mass migration. And these people making a run on the U.S. border. That is what has been happening. So we want to try to make it possible for these people to stay in their own countries. And we want to send the strong message, our borders are closed. We cannot take on the world. I personally, in trying to help other people, let's just put this at a very micro, at a very personal level. I can't take every homeless person into my own home. It just isn't feasible. I cannot do that. But what I can do is I can help individuals, and other people can help individuals, and thus hope improve their lot in life and give them a chance, which is what most of these people want, to remain in their own countries, or if they want to maybe immigrate somewhere else, or to come to the United States through a proper immigration policy that vets individuals. Some of them are people I'd love to have come to the United States because they're hardworking, they're coming from broadly, Catholic, that is to say Christian backgrounds, they're very pro-family, and they're not socialists. The Democrat Party is not where most of these people would naturally reside. They're fleeing socialism. They're fleeing the very things that Democrats are trying to bring into the United States. And I couldn't tell you the number of conversations I've had with them where I'm saying to them, Democrats are not your friends. They're making cynical use of you. They don't care what happens to you from point A, your country of origin, to Z, the United States. They just don't care. They just want to use you as shock troops to destroy the existing cultural landscape and also as illegal voters so they can flip red states and make them blue states. That's what they want to do. But you and I think that what we want is something different. Because Democrats have made such evil use of migrants, I think the result of many people on the right is to hate the migrants themselves because we're sick of the issue. And I'm saying to you, don't. I'm not talking about the cartels. I'm not talking about the criminal element or militia sleeper cells that have been sent into our country. I'm just talking about regular people who are trying to feed their families. So I want to give you a little story. And it's interesting because I've been talking about this with Laza, with Lawrence, and he thinks these are stories I should tell. And I, as a rule, don't want to tell them. It's just because I feel like they're kind of private and I'm not seeking some kind of attaboy in telling these stories. Many of you or would watch or listen to Ideas Have Consequences would do no less than what I've done. But at the end of almost all of these interviews, when I'm talking to these people, I will ask them, how are you feeding your family? Where are you getting food? Have you eaten? How many days has it been since you've had anything to eat. And so maybe I take them to a little grocery store and I buy them some food. And the response is overwhelming emotion. Brazilian woman fed her and her family, gave them some canned goods because they would last. And the Venezuelan woman I was just talking about, who was pregnant, the 20-year-old, 8.5 months pregnant, getting on top of La Bestia, getting on top of that train, the beast, to go 600 miles north. I've had sleepless nights wondering what was her fate, what happened to her. But after I was finished interviewing her, I invited her to, I was there with I'd hired a taxi driver to take me. This is 2 hours north of Mexico City. And I invited her to come around to the side of the taxi, the passenger side of the taxi, away from other migrants, because I didn't want them to see what I was doing because it would possibly endanger her. And I reached into my pocket and I had some cash and I gave her a $100 bill. And I said to her, do not let any of these other people see that you have this, because somebody might kill you for it. And whether you go back home or you're determined to go northward, I don't have any control over that. But I want to see that you and your mother, who was traveling with her, and she had 2 small children, possibly 3, I wasn't real clear, are fed. And this young woman, she sobbed and she threw her arms around me and she was squeezing me like her life depended on it. And I'm talking about tears that it felt like, Lori said to me last night, I was telling her the story and she said, tears of desperation. And I said, yeah, they're tears of desperation, but they're more than that. It's more like these were tears that have been dammed up inside of her for months or years. And she'd not been a safe space to let them go, to let them flow. And she just sobbed. And I'm talking about that kind of weeping that is where the body convulses. And she just, felt like she was going to collapse. You have no heart if you don't care what happens to someone like that. But please understand, again, 2 things can be true at the same time. Democrats want to say if you want the borders closed, it means you don't care about these people. No, the fact of the matter is they don't care about these people. They have caused this crisis because they have essentially told these people to come to the United States. Not the immigrants' fault, not the migrants' fault that they're doing this. They're doing it because they were invited to come by Democrats who don't give a rip about them. But see, in contrast to their argument, which is a fallacious argument, which is a devious, a lying argument, the fact of the matter is you can want a strong border and a strong immigration policy while at the same time saying, I do care about, in Jesus' words, the least of these. What is it that Jesus said? He said, as you treat the least of these, so you treat me, as you do unto me. We're also told in Scripture that many have entertained angels unaware. For all I know, that 20-year-old girl was an angel that was sent to test me. If I had my way, I would help feed her and I would help her stay in her own country and have a better life. But as it is, right now, under those circumstances, she doesn't have it. And she's making a run for the U.S. border because from her point of view, it's the only option she's got. That has to change. And the way that it changes is by destroying the entire system. And that means the cartels, that means the United Nations, that means the NGOs, that means everybody who's helping them all along the way. And it means destroying the evil systems from the countries of their origin. That's what has to happen. That's what I want you to understand. But in telling you this and giving you this big picture, what I'm wanting you to see is in January, I will once again be in Davos at the World Economic Forum. And I am going to sit and listen to a bunch of arrogant, pompous, people who love to think of themselves as compassionate and erudite and people who are changing the world. They don't give a rip about real people. And that is because they're ideologues. They do not care. And I listen to what they have to say and I go, you know what, buddy? I have been to the places that you're talking about. I've actually talked to these people. Have you? I've seen the slums that your ideas create. I've seen the heartbreak that it creates. I have talked to the people whose children are missing because they were trafficked. I've talked to women who were raped going through the Darien Gap, or men who had members of their party shot in the head, or another group who saw a woman eaten by a jaguar. That's the kind of stuff that is happening. It is happening because the ideas, the evil ideas that are hatched in places like Davos, they hatch the idea and they give it legs and they don't care what the consequences are. If you haven't seen it, a movie that I would have you watch, it's actually my least favorite Alfred Hitchcock movie, and I like generally Alfred Hitchcock movies. I don't like movies like the horror ones like The Birds or Psycho, but To Catch a Thief and that sort of thing I can enjoy quite a lot. But one of them that's quite interesting is a film called Rope. And it stars Jimmy Stewart, and he plays a professor of criminology or something like that, and he dazzles his students with his wit, with his intellect, with his stories. And he begins to theorize on what it would be like to commit the perfect murder. Could you commit the perfect murder? And a couple of psychopaths in his class, to impress their professor, they decide they will commit the perfect murder. And in the end, Jimmy Stewart, is the one who figures them out and cracks the case. But what I don't like about the movie is because Jimmy Stewart is actually the villain. They don't tell the story the way you really need to tell that story. And I know this as somebody who's taught for so many years, taught so many young people. And it's irresponsible as a professor, as a teacher, to float evil ideas to students without helping them to understand that they are evil ideas and to help them see why these are not things that should be given, any oxygen. But you see, Jimmy Stewart is an irresponsible professor. He's irresponsible for even floating the idea, and then he's horrified to see that some of his students have decided they would give it legs, that they would test the theory. That's what the World Economic Forum is. It isn't in these globalists in DC and Paris and London and various other places where they're gathering. They don't actually kill anybody themselves. They just float ideas about depopulation that lead to untold number of deaths via abortion and now euthanasia. Infanticide is next. They just float ideas about quote unquote sustainable farming. And if you've watched this show, I've told you that the word sustainable is an evil, it's freighted with anti-human meaning. It's just a disguise for their agenda. Sustainable farming means no industrial farming. It means the destruction of farmers in Britain, in Western Europe, the Netherlands, the United States. That's what's happening. It's being driven by those evil ideas. And their ideas of their open society and open borders and inviting all these people, they don't care what happens to them. But we do. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another episode of Ideas Have Consequences with me, Larry Alex Taunton, and I want to end it by saying this. President Trump, I am thrilled that you have been elected. And I am so thrilled that you will have the power to roll back the globalist agenda. I have given you just a tiny glimpse of how those ideas play out in the lives of real people, just through the example of immigration alone, in just one part of the world alone. I haven't even gotten to the other things like what they're doing in education and what they're doing in government and what they are really doing with sustainable farming and on and on and on. Ukraine. You have it in your power, Mr. President, to destroy it all. Please do.